welcome to the IGS online conference. I'm glad that you all are here, and I'd like to welcome you for a 3-day event which already started yesterday, full of sessions with a great speaker lineup and I hope full of ideas and brand new tech information for all of you. It's a pleasure and an honor to moderate this conference together with you. And I'm really thankful that you are joining this conference right now in front of your screens. Unfortunately, that's the destiny of all of us. This year, the corona pandemic hit the London-based IGS conference as well as the planned New York-based IGS conferences, so that we cannot run them in a physical way. So we decided to switch everything to this online format. Before we start, let me please quickly introduce myself. My name is Sebastian. I lead the editorial and conference program teams here at SNS Media. And we are happy, the entire team, everybody who's working in front or behind the scenes, making this event possible. In the name of the entire team, I'd like to welcome you for the next few days. As I said, the pandemic made it impossible to meet in person. And of course, for health and security reasons, we shouldn't do that right now. And but the problem is, of course, the pandemic forced all of us to lead kind of a very isolated life, so that all the things which are kind of the DNA of a web developer are not easy to realize. That means it is hard to communicate, it is hard to meet, it is hard to share ideas, it is hard to share knowledge these days. We should do this anyway, and we are pretty sure that with that given online format, we have a good opportunity to share ideas, to meet, and to be inspired by others, and to inspire others at the same time for better web development, or for better web design. So for this 3-day conference, we've prepared almost 40 talks for you. This is keynotes, this is lots of sessions, and also some workshops, which already happened yesterday. And we start both mornings, both conference days, today and tomorrow, with the morning keynote. And then there are sessions organized in 3 parallel tracks, which you can visit. That means at every given moment, there are 3 sessions where you can choose from. And the good news is, if we speak about the digital format, is of course, if you are missing 2 other sessions in the moment you're visiting one, those sessions are being recorded and we will be available, I would say 30 minutes, something like that, 30 minutes after they've ended, they are already available as a recorded video, which you then can watch if you want. So we meet here at the online conference platform Swapcard, and I'd like to share some words about the platform together with you so that you understand how you can move around there and how you can benefit from this platform. First of all, of course, Swapcard displays the program. It is sorted by days. You go through the list and decide wherever you want to go. If you are in the detail view of a session, then in the very moment the session starts and Windows opens up and there you see the live stream. Then you follow the live stream, and at the right hand of the live stream, there is a chat board where you can raise your questions, add your comments, and just make your points. And I'd like to encourage, of course, all of you to really, let's say, not be shy, but to engage in the conversation. Add your points, make your comments, inspire all the others, and be inspired by the others, as I already said, because it is really hard for speakers if they just speak into the, let's say, into the nothing. And it's great for the speakers if they receive some sort of a feedback. Yeah. So please use the chat board, as I can see at the moment. Lots of people already do. Good morning. That is great. Don't be shy, communicate, and maybe we should overcompensate a little bit the lack of communication which we have in the digital world, overcompensate it through saying hello and good morning, and of course, maybe through clapping in the hands if you liked the talks. The speakers are really keen on and they're really thankful for your feedbacks you're giving to them. As I already said, they're already at every moment there are 3 tracks in parallel, so you get lots of sessions to choose from. And between 1 and 2 p.m. there's a lunch break. So all the sessions are 45 minutes, and then there's a buffer of 15 minutes for, let's say, some Q&A. And then, of course, we need to stop the previous session in order to be ready for the following sessions. And then between 1 and 2, there's a lunch break. So you can go out, have a coffee, have a lunch, or maybe you go to your oven and make a pizza, whatever you choose. And by the way, all the times are UK times. That is important. So if you're living in a different time zone, please make sure that you adapt to the UK times. The good thing is the platform swap cards recognizes your system time and of course already transforms the times of the sessions displayed so that you don't need to think or to calculate or something like that. Just take the times from the swap card program. So we start at 9 o'clock UK time every morning. And of course, I live, for example, in Germany. So in my swap card representation, it is already 10 o'clock. Speaking about feedback and communication, please do not miss to rate all the sessions in Keynotes you're seeing. Swapcard is giving you a reminder, and after you watch the session, and then you can give 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars. Hopefully there will be many, many sessions rated by, let's say, 5 stars, because I'm really convinced that we got great and wonderful speakers. There's also an expo with exactly 1 exhibitor. It's Progress Software. It would be also great. Have a look at them. They share some information. And as you probably know, Progress is a vendor of UI components for JavaScript and various JavaScript frameworks. Have a look at them, and you can also chat with them in case you've got any questions. There are a few people working at the virtual booth there, and they are happy if you also get into some conversation. I'm pretty sure you can get some interesting info and just have a chat with them. That's it. And as I already said, communication is a little hard in the digital sphere, and we all need to be kind of creative. And I'm pretty sure after so many months, you already started to be experienced in the digital world with Zoom and all these video conferencing systems, how one can make that kind of, let's say, conversation and exchange as valuable as possible. So the situation is the following. Think about a physical conference in pre-corona times. We know, of course, that many, let's say, very valuable conversations are happening in the hallways, at the buffet, over a cup of coffee, over a glass of beer or whatever drink you prefer. And these kind of conversations between attendees and attendees, between attendees and speakers, and so on, these are very valuable. Those informal meetings, they are valuable to meet new friends, to meet old friends, and having just smart, interesting conversations. To have a kind of a compensation for exactly that, we offer tonight. That means after the last sessions at 6 o'clock, we have the iJazz Campfire. For that, we've prepared a Trello board. So, and we are sharing the link of the Trello board through our chat in this keynote right now, hopefully, and as well as at the end of many sessions over the days. Please go to the Trello board, register shortly. I think it's pretty simple, and add the topics you'd like to talk about. Yeah? Because maybe even with about 40 sessions, maybe we missed something. You say, I'd like to discuss a particular topic, which is from a special interest for myself or something like that. So just make cards, suggest your topics, and then at 6 o'clock, Ann-Kathrin will go there and She will sort the cards and create groups and clusters. And then we are creating rooms on Zoom. And then you can all switch to Zoom, from Swapcard to Zoom, go to the rooms and just have an open conversation. And I'd rather really recommend use this opportunity. Go to the different rooms. You can even change between the different rooms. Yeah, of course, we don't want to get everybody in one room because then it's getting chaotic. Yeah, but if we got dedicated rooms based on your ideas, yeah, which you are making through the Trello board over the day. Here I see the link for the Trello board in the chat. Please go there over the day, and if in case you got any idea, make your suggestion, and then again in the evening, Anne-Kathrin will create clusters, will create some rooms, and then there's time for a lively conversation. So feel free to join. And of course, in case a group meets in a room with a certain title, and in case the group to discuss something totally different, feel free. So the topics we are defining are just an occasion to meet. And then, of course, feel free to just network and do whatever you consider being valuable for all of you. So that's it from my side. Again, 3 colleagues of my team, editorial team, are going to moderate the sessions and will, of course, be in the chats and answer your questions and all these things. And I wish you a great day with all the 3 sessions. And now it's an honor to announce our very first keynote. The keynote is about naming things. That's also the title of our keynote. And Sanne Peters, she is a front-end architect and a designer. And she is, well, not really suffering, but she told me that she really believes that giving things and functions and everything which needed to be labeled is really important for a mutual understanding, especially when you're working in teams. And she's talking about how can we make naming things a little better. And now it would be great, Sanne, if you can join the conversation. We already met here. Hi, Sanne. Good morning.
Good morning, and good morning to everyone else.
Yeah, as I already said, now we hear a lot of applause, yeah, because she's coming now on stage. Yeah,
right now.
Exactly. Yeah. And I would just say I head over the stage to you and enjoy everybody Sanne's keynote.
Okay, I'll start sharing my screen then. So, welcome to my presentation, and thank you for joining me this morning. Just to point out really early on in this presentation that this presentation in essence is really a high-level presentation, and it's also both for designers and developers. And I'll dive into that more deeper during this presentation to help you understand that. So first of all, my name is Sanne Peters, and I'm Dutch. That's why I have a strange name for somebody who sounds a bit English. I'm also a front-end architect at Bankai, and I deal with very high-level stuff, mostly organizing systems and stuff like that. And also I'm an active member of the Front-End Foxes, which is a women's group for people who basically work in front-end development. And they also organize some really nice workshops. So I urge you to look into that. So in my daily life, I actually mainly work on design systems, which I did actually do a presentation on yesterday at the Full Stack Day, but also the design operations part of it, which is related to design systems in a sense that the design operations is more about the communication bit and the automation bit of it. But also I'm quite involved in the semantic web, and I usually make a lot of interfaces for it. And when you think about semantic web, you really need to think about linked data and enriching HTML elements with more semantic tags and stuff like that, but also data visualization. And the constant thing that I bump into basically is that I have to name things. And that's what this presentation is basically about, in the things that I've encountered during that process and the last couple of years. And I just want to share that with you. So the topics are basically why I care, and you should too. Some theory, so you get an understanding of what's already been thought and told about the subject, and how to put that theory again into practice. I like to start with this very, very well-known quote. There are only two hard things in computer science: caching validation and naming things. And I kind of like it because it points out how deceptively tricky this subject actually is. And I really don't have any clue how to invalidate cache. So let's just dive into naming things. So why I care and you should too. The reason I think in a very fundamental level is why I care so deeply much about it is that I have autism. And this kind of means that I have almost innately a difficulty understanding something that is somehow implied or hinted at. But it also makes me very acutely aware of these actual problems when they're happening, and that they also might just be affecting not just me, but others. And this is why in communication, I appreciate clarity above anything else, because that way I will be always understand what the other person means, and I can do something with that. And using the right name for something is just really, really important in this. And this is why I care so much about naming things. It kind of makes communication, in a sense, more accessible. And the reason you should care is that using the right name for something makes communication in general just clearer and easier, therefore, to understand. And it just saves time. And when you save time, you can do other things with your time. And that's a good thing in general. So when you put just a little bit of extra effort into properly naming a thing, you're not just showing you care about the quality of making, but you also care about the efficiency of everyone else in your team. And that's why I care, and you should too. So yeah, but why is naming things hard? And when we build things, the focus is usually just getting on things done, and that means that other things get less attention and just get a backseat. And it's also true when you do try to document things, they just get ignored. But then you also have the problem that people are lazy, and that's also kind of the reason why things don't get properly named. And in the end, you just, yeah, I already said that. Proper names and documentation just get in the backseat. And so what you really need to start doing is start think ahead. And that's just really hard. And the reason why it's hard is that the meaning of a name needs to remain clear even throughout time. And this is where something like the field of semantics can actually help you. And let's dive into some theory. I love theory. So let's dive into it. And it's semantics, basically. And semantics is, in other words, the philosophy of meaning. And that's maybe a bit strange, but semantics talks about how things do not exist on their own, but always within a context. And you can think about contexts like domains. And each domain has its own name for things. And you can also call this domain and its names, you can call that a shared language. And basically what this means is that a shared language is a common way of understanding of what you mean and what the other also understands. So it provides you with a way of doing effective communication, but only within the domain. So in other words, shared language, I'm going to continue on that bit, is that, in other words, names allow us to discuss a subject without it actually being present. This is very, very esoteric and philosophical, but as software developers, we really need to be thinking about this, because we're making abstract things that not always can be captured in real life situations or real life examples. So being a little philosophical in your work isn't a bad thing. It actually will help you. And let's get back to it. So names allow us to discuss a subject without it being present. For instance, if you want to talk about John from accounting, about and how he's really into bonsai, you really should try to do that without using names or examples. And it becomes completely impossible. And therefore, it's good to give it a name that makes sense to everyone on the team, and maybe even everyone in the organization. And that's really what a shared language is. And shared language is also true when we are building systems, because those systems will inherently contain new components, and those need to have meaningful names for within your organization or your team. And the reason for that, so you can easily talk about them. So everyone uses the same name for a thing and just doesn't use different names, because if somebody uses a name A for a thing and you use name B for a thing, you don't really know what you're talking about. And there is no communication. There's only miscommunication. And using this now shared language that you can have in your team just makes it more easy to create new names, and that just makes sense to everyone. So let's take this into a more of a practical realm. Take for instance me. My name is Sanne, but that's not really descriptive of what and who I am. It's just a name. And if you're Dutch, it's even worse, because apparently in my generation, it was the most popular name for a girl. And that's why in my street, there is actually one person already living with exactly the same name, even my last name. So maybe better ones would be software architect at Bunkai, because that's highly specific. And I'm the only one there. So you can easily deduce from that, okay, that's me. But this only has meaning in a work context. So, for instance, if we want to pull this to a family context, a better name for me would be the tall know-it-all, because that's what I'm generally known as. But let's go back into a slightly more practical example again, as in variables. And I like to use color names because they resonate easily and have inherently more meaning. So if you, for instance, take the variable name red, and it has a value which is basically translates into a red color. But the thing is, it has actually no meaning. And people will, for that reason, not use it properly, or not use it as how it was actually intended to be used. So if you would change it to a more meaningful name like CTA color or call to action color, then people would implicitly already know what that thing does. Because within our context, the CTA is a call to action, which is something that needs to stand out and draw attention. And now we as developers and designers then know that the thing, that color, is applied to everything that has CTA. And therefore it gets better usage and better meaning. And it's just more practical in a sense. But let's like take it to an even higher level and use UI components. And this is where things get a lot trickier, because it's no longer simple anymore. It becomes more complex. And as soon as things become more complex, you really need to put a little bit of extra effort in to think about what they do. And I'll try to give you an example of how we use our process to figure that out. Because when we look at this, we see 3 blocks, but that's just visually. And when you think about naming things, you should never name them on a visual basis, like in the slide before, when we wanted to have a variable that somehow contained the color red, but it was kind of meaningless that way, because we could easily use that color for several purposes, and then maybe the purpose of that variable change, which then maybe even change the color. So if we go back to the UI component now, and we see not just blocks, but we see functional things. And the designer says, as a bit of documentation, like, these are not just blocks, but they have a purpose. And the purpose is to communicate USBs. But I kind of also want to use these blocks for explaining service specifications. For instance, if a product has certain services bundled together, they want to also show that this way. So it's not just USP, but also services. So we need to think about something that encompasses all of them in one thing. And that's why, for instance, a thing like USP block would be bad, because you're talking about block, which is visual again, but USP summary is also kind of bad. It's okay-ish, because it does encompasses the meaning of USPs, and that you summarize it somehow, because you only show the intro text, which kind of explains what this privacy thing does. But it doesn't really work if it's a service, because then it's no longer USP. So that's where this is the point where I want to do a little contest thing, as in let everyone else who's watching right now come up with a better name for this. And to help you even further along, I want to point out one extra feature that might be just a little bit vague, but the thing is, these things always appear in groups. There's never going to be one USP or one service bundled to a product. It's always going to be a group. So think about that. And just give me good alternative or just good names for this thing. And I'll explain what the name is we chose for it, because it's an actual component in a website that we build. So to give you another example, which is functions, functional, so functions, but they do a specific thing. So I wanted to give an example for functions specifically, because maybe designers are checking out right now, but that's fine. You could have a function called sort names, but when you start looking into what it actually does, it kind of doesn't really just sort names. It kind of sorts strings, and it does it in a very specific way, as in it actually does it alphabetically. So maybe the name's not right. So maybe we should change it to sort alphabetically, and instead of names, call it strings. And with that, you kind of make the name almost more implicitly clearer. And that this is kind of has something to do with that code should document itself. But I'm not a very strong fan, because sometimes code just still difficult, just add documentation anyway. But yeah, to put this into more practical checklist kind of things, this is kind of the rules that we follow, as in avoid colloquialisms, which is a difficult word for saying typically local ways of saying things. Like in India, in England, in general, you would say a dodgy way, but in the rest of the world, people would just say a wrong way. And I urge people to use the more common ways of saying things, because otherwise an American speaker might just, or a non-native English speaker might not even get what it's about. And it just ruins communication. They misinterpret it, they might even misinterpret it. And that's where it just goes wrong. And also try to just use simple words, because a word like strenuous, also hard to understand if you're not a native English speaker. And I honestly had to train myself not to be the person who uses the difficult words. And since I think about maybe 2 years, I try to talk in more simpler terms, which I notice makes communication a lot easier. And furthermore, stay away from abbreviations. And I've noticed a lot of developers just like to be quick about it and use the abbreviations really, really like intensely. But the problem is your code becomes really hard to read, and the person who's reading it kind of almost implicitly needs to know what every abbreviation means. And a good example is recently we had this thing called a CMT. And I remember the first half hour just thinking, like, should I know this abbreviation? But in the end, actually after half an hour just said, like, okay, I don't know what a CMT is. Could somebody just explain it to me? And they said content management tool. And I was like, okay, can we just call it content management tool instead? And because CMT is difficult to understand, it needs an extra step in learning. While content management tool is just clear. It explains itself. So other things to do is to get some inspiration, because sometimes you're just stuck and you just don't know how to name a thing. And what we also try to do is reason from another person's perspective. So I try to imagine what somebody who's not like me, and I think about like a graphic designer or a product owner and what they might call it for some reason, and get their perspective on it, and then roll with it and see how that works. But also, we try to just ask a coworker, because they see things from a slightly different perspective. And if you then brainstorm about it a little bit and try some different variations, you might just get to the right one. And in general, two minds are more than one. And finally, just iterate on the name, because it sometimes can just be really hard to predefine the functionality of or the purpose of an item, because it might just be very vague. And if you go through it, you start to understand it more thoroughly, and you have a deeper understanding of what it does and what it should be doing, and maybe what it doesn't do yet. But if you start with this working title, basically, and update it throughout the development process, you will get to a name that actually makes sense. So to get some more inspiration, we also like to open up a thesaurus. And a thesaurus is basically a dictionary, but then you can look up the synonym for something else. So I can't really think about something right now, but it's just basically, it's a different word for the same thing. And sometimes you think of a word, but the word is actually a complex version of it. And you just kind of lost on what it could be named better in a simpler way. And thesauruses kind of really work with this problem. And I think I'll probably check thesaurus.com about 2 times a month just to get some better ideas. And it always works. And furthermore, you have the field of semantics like schema.org, which is actually kind of the basis of all the semantics, where all the basic things are defined. And funny enough, all the people who have worked on it already came up with really, really decent names. And this goes back to my core philosophy, that you really shouldn't try to reinvent the wheel, because most things, funny enough, have been invented already. So you just have to look them up and use them. And if you just do it like that, life just becomes a lot easier. So I think that's about it. And I really just would like to thank you all for listening. And you can ask me anything about naming things. And you can also find me on Twitter at Sunstreamed, which is my alias almost everywhere. And I think that's it. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, Sanne.
You're welcome.
Thanks for a keynote. And now it's just my job to look at the board and if there are some questions. So there are lots of comments. Let me just check. One question, which was about the colors. What if I have 10 different shades of red? I don't know the context. Well, derived directly from the context, but maybe it makes sense to talk about that.
I know, and I know that I've been here. That designer basically comes up with a giant color palette of colors, and usually that happens really early on in the process, and then it's kind of worthwhile to start discussing about this color palette and the meaning behind every single color, because then you can get a more of a feel of why this giant color palette was even invented. Because I don't know how many shades of red, 10 shades of red. There must be a reason why this person came up with 10 different shades of red. It's mind-boggling why somebody would want to do this, but maybe you can, together with the designer or the person we came up with in general, just help reduce that palette, because I can't really think why you would really need 10, maybe 5. That makes sense, because, or maybe they just want to do a gradient thing, but then you only need 2 colors. So it's really about the conversation. I can't give you like a definitive answer, but it's getting through it together and figuring out what the core reason is.
So yeah, thank you very much. I really enjoyed your keynote. It was very inspiring, also because it is about empathy, isn't it? Yeah, is it about trying to understand what the other persons might think about something, and to make sure that that kind of communication, even the smallest bits, is working to some degree. Yeah. Here's another question. I need to go forward and read it. Regarding the sort names, sort alphabetically example, there's a tension in some code bases to make the implementation more complex to watch the specific name. Have you seen this? Is there a compromise between the two extremes?
Oof, that's very involved question, long one too. I actually see it on my screen. So regarding sort names, sort alphabetically example, there's a tension between some code bases to make the implementation more complex and match the specific name. Have you seen this? I'm actually not really sure what's meant by this. But I do, what I did experience is that some people have the tendency to make things as generic as possible so they can be used for everything. But with that is that you maybe can reuse it for everything, but it becomes so multi-purpose that it becomes completely unmaintainable. So I advocate actually to make things more specific, and through that, especially when we're talking about stuff like design systems, it is worthwhile to condense them in such a way that they actually safeguard the design in a way. And wow, it's a tricky question, but I'm leaning towards.
Alexis also offered another comment. Maybe it makes its question a little clearer.
Alexis Staffer, I think it's called.
Yes.
So I've seen one people make a names class. Not really sure. Is that like a general class in a sense of that it generates a name? I'm not really sure what that means. Sorry.
It is hard, as I said in the beginning, sometimes in the digital sphere. So maybe you all meet also in the campfire, and then there's a possibility to chat directly about these things. That makes sometimes communication a little bit easier. If there aren't any more questions, then I would say, please, if you liked her talk, clap. Oh, there's some more questions. Oh, whoa. Now it's coming. We got time. Do you want me to read it, or would you like to catch them by your own?
I can try. There are some tools. Okay, that's just not a question. do you have any ideas that might help streamline terminology between designer, developers, and UX researchers?
Interesting.
Yeah, that's basically this shared language that I pointed out, because the shared language is something you come up with together. So especially when naming colors and how they should be used, giving them meaningful names, and giving meaningful names to UI components, that's something we really need to discuss with the person who basically invented the name and the color. And that's the designer, because they already have an intention of how it should work. And from that intention, you can come up with a name more easily. And by having that conversation as well, you get a deeper understanding of the intent made by the designer.
One last question by Raoul. So what did you end up naming the USP summary?
We actually call them short explainers, and the emphasis is also on the plural bit of it, because we kind of bundled them in a way that they would also always show a set of them. And the set is because there are always just one or more of them. And so you basically provide them with a configuration of the contents, and they generate a set of them. And the thing is, in functional, from a purely functional perspective, they give you a term and a short explanation. And that's basically what they do. They don't do anything else than that. And we try to keep that the functional description simple, because we then can more easily like change the visual layout. So like if we would turn them into a circle, they wouldn't be a block anymore. So, but they would still have the same name because the function never changed. So that's how we talk about things.
Cool. So if there aren't any more questions, I would like to say again, thank you so much for this inspiring opening keynote of the conference. And maybe you can clap virtually in the chat board. And I hope to see all of you soon in the evening at the campfire. And now, of course, the conference with the 3 tracks in parallel are going to start. And as I said in the beginning, 3 of my colleagues are going to moderate and, of course, support a little bit by adding a link between the speaker, the remote speaker, and you being a remote attendee. So thank you very much, Sanne. Thank you very much for being here at the conference. Enjoy the conference day, and let's meet all together at the campfire tonight. Bye-bye.
Bye.